The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus came out in 2014 and took the world by storm, quickly becoming the best-selling smartphones ever by a wide margin. And here we are 5 years later with iOS 13 just being announced. The iPhone 6 is running the most current version of iOS 12, but won't be able to update to iOS 13 come this September. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be talking about the forever disappointing life of the iPhone 6. You know what would be really disappointing? Not following me over on Twitter and Instagram at 91_tech, so you should go do that. Now don't get me wrong, from Apple's perspective, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus were near perfect. They were received overwhelmingly positively at launch and sold like hotcakes. With the drop of support coming in a few months, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a big wave of people upgrading to the newest iPhone from the 6 specifically. But the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus had their fair share of problems, from Bendgate to a few more things I'll get into. These phones, as well as they sold, to me are one of the most disappointing iPhones of all time. They had issues galore, and in this video we're going to discuss them, and of course why I consider the iPhone 6 to be forever disappointing. So let's start where everyone expects me to start, Bendgate. Going back to 2014 after the launch of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, and people began to notice their phones were bending. This happened particularly when they weren't using a case and were wearing tight pants, or dropped their phones, or were in some other situation that was putting a lot of strain on the device. This also is more commonly happening with the 6 Plus, although the 6 seemed to be susceptible as well. After a few reports of bending, Lou from Unbox Therapy did a video where he relatively easily bent the iPhone 6 Plus. This video went viral, and with it so did the term Bendgate. The iPhone 6 was bending way easier than it should have, a massive design flaw that Apple refused to own up to. Interestingly enough, this actually never deterred sales. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus sold over 220 million units worldwide. Take this in comparison to the second best-selling smartphone, the Samsung Galaxy S4, a phone that sold around 80 million. Mind you, these numbers could be different now. The article I pulled this info from has the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus at third place with 78 million, and the article came out a year ago, so it could very well be that the iPhone 7 is now in second place. Wikipedia has it around 65 million, but seems their source is older, so regardless, the iPhone 6 sold really well and almost triple what second place did, and it sold that well because the bigger screen was something people had really wanted for a long time, and it sucks that Apple put out a poor quality product. How many customers did Apple lose over the Bendgate fiasco? Probably not many, but I'm sure they did lose some, and in the very least, I think it's safe to say this whole situation was disappointing. The iPhone 6 Plus would eventually get a multi-touch repair program from Apple made to combat an issue called touch disease that plagued the iPhone 6, although Apple never really owned up to the whole incident. They were actually brought to court over this, where it was finally revealed Apple knew the iPhone 6 wasn't up to par quality-wise, but I mean, we all knew that was the case anyway. Touch disease was a problem where touch screens would eventually just stop working. They wouldn't recognize your touch even if you could still see stuff on it, and I've actually experienced this. The iPhone 6 Plus I have actually does have touch disease, and it makes it quite difficult to film this sometimes. Touch disease was terrible, and if you've dealt with it, you know how much it sucks. The iPhone 6S, released a year later, had a stronger aluminum used. It is honestly one of the most durable smartphones I've ever owned. The sum of all of this, the early life of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus were already not going great. Sure, they were selling super well, but suffered from bending and eventually touch disease, but whatever, life moves on, right? Well, unfortunately the story doesn't end there. I think the next main incident with the iPhone 6 line requires fast forwarding to late 2017, when it was revealed Apple was purposely slowing down old iPhones. Now there's obviously more to the story, and I actually defended Apple for this back in the day, but you can tell it wasn't a good headline, and it didn't make Apple look particularly good. This wasn't an iPhone 6 specific problem, but one with the 6, 6S, and SE, in which Apple would throttle the CPU power in order to avoid random unexpected shutdowns that would occur from having a poor battery. Given that the iPhone 6 has been around the longest at this point, it was the most likely to experience these issues, as the battery in most people's phones was likely degraded. The reason I defended Apple at the time was because I figured it was better to have a slightly slower phone than one that randomly powers off all the time. I think Apple definitely should have told people about this, however, and even more so given people the choice to turn this feature on or off. And to their credit, Apple eventually did give that feature in iOS 11, as well as reducing the price and replacing old batteries for a year. It's regularly priced now, but still, at least they did something about it. Not that I exactly forgive Apple for this. They introduced the battery throttling, if that's what you want to call it, in iOS 10.2.1, and didn't give the option until iOS 11.3 to turn it off. If it hadn't been figured out that Apple was doing this in the first place, they may never have given that option at all, and I think that's a bit of a problem. But that's a subject for another time. It's already been beaten to death, so let's continue. So while this incident was not directly because of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, I think it's relevant because it was a blip in the lifespan of the device. We're talking about why the phone has been perpetually disappointing, and I find it hard not to consider the whole battery throttling scandal a part of that. But at least it wasn't as big of a deal as Bendgate, right? And nothing after Bendgate really was, although it did get dragged up about a year ago again with those new documents revealing Apple knew something was wrong with it. Again, obviously they knew something was wrong with it, but for some it was a big deal to finally receive that confirmation. We've already beat Bendgate to death, so let's move on to the most recent disappointment. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus will not receive the iOS 13 update and will be stuck on iOS 12 come this September. The rumor mill has been saying this was likely to happen for literal months, but for many still holding on to their iPhone 6, this isn't a particularly pleasant announcement. I don't think it would be a big deal had the iPhone 5S not received the iOS 12 update, but it did, which means the 2014 iPhone 6 won't get any more updates than the 2013 iPhone 5S. Now personally, I don't have a problem with this, and I'll explain why in a moment here, but first keep in mind this isn't happening because Apple is trying to force you to buy a new iPhone. If that was the case, the 5S would not have gotten iOS 12 last year. Not to mention the iPhone 6 is already 5 years old and is still fully supported on iOS 12 as of right now. Android phones are lucky if they get 3 years of support, and even if they do, those updates often come months and months after Google initially releases them. And already we're seeing memes like this. This video probably won't reach a lot of people. I'm not expecting a lot of views, but for anyone who has this mindset, let me be clear, this is not the case. For me, the iPhone 6 isn't disappointing because it's not getting iOS 13, it's disappointing because the hardware won't allow it to get iOS 13. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are barely better than the iPhone 5S. They have the A8 processor and 1GB of RAM, while the iPhone 5S has the A7 chip and also only 1GB of RAM. That single gig of RAM just isn't enough anymore, and there are no devices with only a gig of RAM capable of running iOS 13 or iPadOS 13. The iPad Mini 4, which is getting iPadOS, has the A8 chip, and the iPad Air 2 has the A8X processor, but they also both have 2GB of RAM, and that's why they're getting the update and the iPhone 6 isn't. Trust me, the iPhone 6 is slow enough already. Getting iOS 13 would make it borderline unusable. Let me be clear, Apple is not retiring the iPhone 6 to screw over the consumer, they're retiring it due to technical limitations. Say what you want about Apple, but they are the best when it comes to support over a long period of time. No Android phone will get you 5 years. The iPhone 6 is barely any better than the 5S, and with the bigger screen it has more pixels to push, making it even more difficult for the phone. It makes sense it's not getting iOS 13, and again, I don't find this disappointing. I find it disappointing that Apple didn't give the iPhone 6 at least 2GB of RAM in the first place. I think they could have done it, but instead they saved it for the iPhone 6S the following year. And I mean, the 6S is going to be very good longevity-wise. I would expect it to get iOS 14 next year, and possibly even 15, although that could be a stretch, I guess we'll find out. But the 6S is leaps and bounds ahead of the 6 in speed, and I wish Apple had made it better so that it could have lasted longer and received iOS 13. But at the end of the day, I think Apple is doing the right thing by keeping the iPhone 6 on iOS 12. It'll still have about 2 years or so of continued app support, and iOS 12 is actually fairly fast. It's a good software iteration to end on, unlike say the iPhone 4S on iOS 9. If you don't know about the iPhone 4S on iOS 9, I'll link in the description a video where I lived with the phone for a whole week. It is very slow. 5 years of support is impressive, and perhaps we hold Apple to too high of a standard. They are the most valuable company in the world, but they also are still supporting their iPhones for way longer than any Android manufacturer is, even Google themselves. That all being said, I think I'm going to end this video here. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus sold super well, but had a lot of problems throughout their lifespan, and while it's kind of sad they're finally being retired, it isn't particularly surprising, and I'm not too torn up about it. That being said, I think overall there was just too many issues in the iPhone 6's life, and that's why I consider it to be forever disappointing. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting, maybe hit that like button, and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at 91_tech if you want some more tech in your life. And with that all being said, I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.